Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Anthony Priori. I'm the digital marketing manager at TPGI. We're just going to wait 1 minute as people sign in, and then we'll get started briefly. I still see a couple people trickling in, so we're just going to give it 1 more minute, and we will get started momentarily. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us today for our webinar, User-Centered Testing with User Journeys and JAWS Inspect, with Charlie Pike, Director of Platform Success. Before we get started, I just have a couple housekeeping items I want to get to. So firstly, this session is being recorded and we will email everyone the recording after the event. Secondly, I want to mention that we have captions available, so feel free to turn those on and use those as needed. Next, we will have time for a live Q&A later in the webinar, so please use the Q&A box and we'll answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. I do want to emphasize and encourage that you use the Q&A box for questions. Sometimes if you send your questions to the chat, they can get lost and we may not see them as quickly, so it's easier for us to monitor the Q&A box, but we will keep an eye on both. And lastly, if everyone needs any accessibility support, training, or usability testing, we will send out an email with a link to schedule a time to speak with one of our experts. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Charlie and let him get started.
Very good. Thanks very much, Anthony. So, yeah, I'm Charlie Pike. I'm the Director of Platform Success here at Vispero, which really means I'm kind of the liaison between our customers and our platforms and various products. That includes the ARC platform and JAWS Inspect, the ARC Toolkit, and a number of different pieces that we use. Both for our audits and our accessibility scanning and our user-centered testing, which I'll be talking about today. So I've been in accessibility for just about 20 years now. I hate to say that, it makes me feel old, but that's the reality. Yeah, this is something that I guess doesn't get focused on too much. We tend to focus very much on accessibility in terms of compliance and the WCAG guidelines, Section 508, and so on. And user-centered testing really, and user journeys really doesn't get a lot of focus. But I think that is changing, and that sort of mood music is changing. In terms of how that is done and where that focus goes in accessibility work. So I'm here to just to kind of outline those changes and show some methods including a demo of JAWS Inspect, of some of these user journeys in action in JAWS Inspect. They just give you a sense of how it can be done in a testing program. So I'm going to give you an introduction to the topic, and then going to talk a little bit about when and how to test with JAWS, and then, building user journeys, testing user journeys. And then, as I said, I'm going to give you a demonstration of some of this in action and how you might go about it. And then finally, I'll open it up for questions and answers. If you do have a question in the meantime, as we go along, do pop it in to the Q&A panel, and we will read through them and answer them at the end as best we can. So why user journeys in this context? Well, first of all, obviously, it's about user-centered design. And an awful lot of, as I said, I've been doing this for more than 20 years. And a lot of design in terms of software, even of websites, has very little around the user. And sometimes you ask yourself, why was certain things actually built in the first place? Because they have no clear user in mind. User-centered design keeps the focus on who you're building for. And it's obvious in organizations and software companies and so on when that is central, because the UI gets a lot more love. And what we see in TPGI is often that accessibility failures and problems go hand in hand with a lack of love for the UI in general, and therefore symptomatic of a general lack of attention to the user, to the end user. So it's user journeys help you to better identify user needs. And I'll talk a little bit later about kinds of user journeys and what we mean by user journeys. And there's a lot of different methods and a lot of different, if you like, approaches to doing user journeys. But one way or another, the focus is on users completing tasks, right? What do they want to do? How do they go about it in your solution? Possible paths, and are they efficient, and are they intuitive, etc. So better identify user needs, which goes into what you build. If you're entirely focused on what users are trying to achieve, then you're going to be able to cut out a lot of extraneous features, a lot of extraneous UI, and just keep your focus of your solution on what the user is trying to do. And you want to build useful software and websites. Okay, at the end of the day, that's what it's for. It's for somebody to do something, get something, achieve information, complete a task, whatever it might be. That's what it is for. So I mentioned that the mood music is changing, and just a quick potted history of WCAG going back to 1999 and the first launch, version 1 of the WCAG guidelines. And then version 2 in 2008, where we got the 4 principles and the sort of broader applicability. So that early launch was focused on the very static websites, as we call them, of the time, and the peculiarities of those sites. 2008, we were much further on. We had rich internet applications. We started to see more on mobile, etc. And the WCAG guidelines needed more applicability. Okay. 2018, 10 years later, we got a lot more focus on mobile, and we got some new success criteria. Okay, so all the time we were building up these guidelines and trying to make them comprehensive in terms of what they captured, and abstract enough to be usable in lots of different situations, but at the same time concrete enough to form the basis, as they do, for a lot of mandates and laws around the world. 2023, we got parsing was removed because of the changes in browser behavior. And we got 9 new success criteria to cover new scenarios or to improve previous scenarios. So looking to the future then, and version 3, we don't know when version 3 will be, of course, but the word on the street is that there's going to be a greater focus on user experience. Okay. An interesting early case of this approach was actually in Section 508 and the functional performance criteria, which just said, if for users, particular users and user groups, they must be able to complete certain tasks. So it was broad, and the focus was really on being able to do things. And I think that's a good move. We do want to get rid of or move away from pure compliance and box ticking to really what makes a difference to the users. Focusing this way also has the additional effect of really understanding the problem, right? Rather than just following a set of guidelines. A deeper understanding is needed to properly address the user experience. You need to understand what the users are doing, how they use their assistive technologies, and the ways that users behave and work their way through applications and sites. So in JAWS testing, where you're using JAWS and JAWS Inspect, which I'll talk about in a little bit, user journeys come in to help you focus on core tasks. Okay, so if you're just doing JAWS testing and you're just making sure that your application or your site is compliant with JAWS, works with JAWS effectively, then you can find a whole load of things, but they may not be very useful to the core task. Let's say, for example, you're a hotel website and your core task is really your booking engine, right? Where people select a hotel, select their room, and so on, pay for that, use their filters, pay for that, etc., to the shopping cart. Those are core tasks. And by using user journeys, you can lay out those core tasks and they become the focus of your testing. The other advantage is that this is much more interactive testing than your typical JAWS testing, where you're just looking to make sure that all the information is available in the right way in the interface. The focus on task completion and efficiency, not compliance. You're not necessarily worried about ticking all the boxes. You really want to make sure that it just works efficiently. And it gives you a cross section of the UI and content. So as you move through a journey and that process on the hotel website, selecting your hotel, selecting your room, etc., you should be touching on most of, if not all of, the unique UI in the interface. And that's what you want. Okay, you can't always exhaustively test every single screen, every single template. What you want to capture, which is what we do when we do our manual audits, is a sampling of all the unique UI across the application. And user journeys gives you that extra element of focus when you do that. You've got your cross section of the UI and it's focused on the core tasks. So getting into the building of user journeys, the first step is really around building your personas. You need to have somebody properly imagined and created, if you like, in order to be the basis of the user journeys, and particularly what they want to achieve, their assistive technologies and so on. There are lots of different ways to do personas. It is obviously best to use actual user research, testing, etc., to build these out and keep them as close to reality as possible. The level or depth is entirely up to you with the persona. Some people really go to town with these. For me, it's best to keep it on a kind of a single card level, if you like. Things that you really must have, some element of background, goals and motivations is very important. The pain points that the user has. This is a very good way of creating a realistic scenario. There are things that annoy everybody when they're using applications and sites, and having those pain points in mind will will help you identify things that are really going to cause problems for the users. And then finally, of course, the technologies, the assistive technology, browser, etc., that's in play. So here we have an example. Victoria, 38 years old, college graduate. We've got some background details here, and types of equipment: laptop, braille display, iPhone. Okay, so that's the core information we need. The level of ability: blind since birth with some light perception. Skilled technology user, this is important. Digital native, early adopter, persists until she gets it. So she's willing to try things out. She's willing to have a go, but she will have strong opinions. She will not have much patience with badly done UIs. And the assistive technology here is a screen reader, audio note taker, and braille display. Okay, and the pain points: unclear navigation, lack of useful descriptions for products and images. So typical frustrations that any screen reader user would have out there on the web, just either no descriptions or very, very poor descriptions of things as they're going along. So that to me is a good, reasonably thorough persona. And once you can create that person, then a lot of it comes very easily in terms of the user journey. As human beings, we're very, very focused on other human beings. It's wonderfully motivational if you can actually put a face to what you're doing for your teams and yourselves. To have someone very, very clear in mind, but it really helps with making your user journeys effective, okay, and real, so they feel real. A quick mention of user journeys in UX design. So once you've created user journeys, they are a very good way, as I said, to focus on what you build, on what the user is trying to achieve. So we have an example of a user journey here in the specification of a software. In this case, it's the creation of a role, right? In maybe the settings of a piece of software. And you've got the steps: create new role, invite a new user, associate a user with a role. These are the core tasks and what the user needs to achieve in each of those tasks. View list of roles, edit role, archive, unarchive, delete a role, etc. This is a typical part of a lot of software design these days. And again, you can check against your user and go, do we need this? What does the user need to do? It's a very, very good way of getting your exhaustive list of behavior and also analyzing from the very start just how efficient it is. How many steps can we do this in? How clear will it be? If you can do this from the very beginning and stick to it and use it as a basic map of your application, it's going to be that much more usable down the line. And here's a more sort of typical user journey that you might be familiar with. In this case, a shopping customer journey map. And here we've got taking the stages of the journey, right? So user journeys are often broken up into groups or stages. We have motivation, searches for websites, browses the site, evaluates products, pays, and receives products, right? All the way from motivation to actually completing the purchase, and what the customer's feelings are along the way. Okay. Again, this stuff can be totally up in the air. You can put anything that you want down here in terms of customer expectations or experiences. But if you have good personas behind it, it will guide the process and keep it grounded in what's real, what's likely to be real scenarios with users. So for testing purposes, though, we're not looking at something quite like that. We're looking at something a bit more focused on on test plans and less on emotions, right, and responses to things. So here we've got a test plan based on a user journey. So we have a site, a sort of shopping site that we use, a fake shopping site as a demo site. And we've built a test process around that. Okay. And again, we've broken it down into stages. And it's a shopping end-to-end process. We've broken it down into stages. Got browses the site, evaluates products, and pays. Okay, so we're just using the stages that we can test because this is a test plan that we can test on the site with JAWS or JAWS Inspect, etc. So here we've got Victoria. We've created a scenario. Victoria needs to buy new sneakers for her son. She's price sensitive, but prefers sites that provide detailed information about their products. Okay. And the expectations are a large range that should be easy to browse, ability to compare brands, and clear pricing. That's what she expects to find. So we break this down into separate tasks. She checks out deals on the homepage, goes to the sale, browses a sale item, browses categories, selects a product, takes it through to the cart, and then onward to payment and all the steps along the way. Okay, so this becomes our script of what the user is going to do or the tester is going to do each time they run through this journey and record results. Okay, so this will hit on a lot of the, if not most of the UI elements in that store, and that's a thing to consider, right? Not just specific tasks, but can I do these tasks in a way that's going to hit on all our various bits of UI, our dialog boxes, our filter controls, our shopping cart control, pop-ups, etc. We want to capture as much of the UI between our various user journeys as we can. So now we come to actually testing the user journeys and how we roll this out in a testing program. Okay, there are lots of different ways to test. These can become assets that can be utilized in all stages of your testing process and development pipeline. Okay, there's the first off is the crawling and scanning. This our product Accessibility Resource Center includes a scan capability that will crawl hundreds or even thousands of pages and test them for accessibility. Okay, and you could run that on a regular basis on that process, on that process that I just showed you, and monitor it and make sure that that key flow is not changing. That's really where monitoring comes in. The automated monitoring is not particularly good for compliance testing because it can actually mislead you, right? Only a certain number of the criterion can be tested effectively with the automated testing, but it's very good for tracking changes. And then you go and figure out what caused those changes. Okay, we've had a spike, we've had an increase in the number of accessibility issues in our shopping cart process. Why? Have we introduced a new component? Have we changed the development team? Are we using a new component library for our materials or new templates? What is it that's actually the root cause of that problem? That's really where this crawling and scanning comes in. Then we have JAWS Inspect that I'm going to demo to you in a little bit. And that's really for your JAWS testing and your user experience testing. Okay, and that can actually be done by your QA teams, by your UX team, by developers. I'm going to talk about it a bit, but one of the nice things about it is because it's not technical compliance testing against, say, WCAG criteria, you don't need to have accessibility experts run that testing. It can be quite intuitive. If you understand a bit about the assistive technology and the users, you can do that testing effectively without getting into tags or code or anything like that. On the other hand, we have the Arc Toolkit. That's a browser extension, and you can run through that same process with that. And there you are doing what I would call technical testing. You're testing the code. You're making sure that things are properly formed, that they're properly, your code is correct, your tags are correct. And that is more technical testing, but it can be done again by a variety of teams, and in quite, because it's a browser extension, you can run it in deep environments. You can run it on your desktop. You can run it before you commit code and so on. It's quite versatile that way. I will give you a look at that. The most in-depth you can do with these user journeys then is a compliance audit, right? Which is a lot of what we do in Vispero day by day. We've got large teams doing audits all the time, but you can use the same components, the same flow. And again, the important thing is that you're exhaustive in catching all the unique UI through your sampling, but it's a very good basis for a compliance audit, because again, it's focused on the user and the core tasks for the user. So you know that the things that you're looking at are going to be priorities. And then finally, the gold standard, if you like, is user research, using those same scripts and processes and the shopping cart flow to do research with actual users. And that then will feed back into your whole user journey and process. You'll learn a lot about your users, improve your user profiles, and improve your user journeys going forward. But it'll tell you, it's the ultimate gauge of how well you're going with your accessibility at the end of the day, moving beyond compliance to just, is it usable? Is it efficient? And just an example here of a test plan. This is in our ARC product, and it's an audit. Okay, and this is an example of a test plan where we might include part of that flow. Okay, in this place we've got our top products carousel. So this is a component in our audit that we're going to audit. And we've identified, you'll notice main pattern here, carousel. We've identified what this particular component represents. Because again, this is a sampling. We're not going to test all the carousels in this application. What we're going to do is take one carousel, and then for the purposes of the developers who are going to get a report at the end of the day, they need to understand that they're not just fixing one carousel. They need to change how they do their carousels across the board to make sure they are accessible. Okay, so that's where we identify the pattern that we're testing here, what it stands for. But this is basically it. We've taken each part of our flow, our user journey, which has become a test script, and then we've broken it down into individual components that we're going to audit in detail during the audit. But because it's based on that plan, we retain that link to the user at all times. Okay, and again, things are prioritized, therefore, on the basis that this is a core flow product. It needs to work. Okay, beyond any other part of the interface, this flow needs to work. And just a look at how all of that testing might fit in an accessibility assembly line, as I'm calling it here, like a development life cycle. So obviously these vary hugely and are usually a lot more complex than this, but this is just for illustration. So we've broken it down into steps. We've got monitor, then plan, then code, commit, test, and release. Okay. And the monitoring is done, as I mentioned, with ARC with the automated testing. So you're testing your production code constantly to make sure that things are going in the right direction. Okay. But then you can use the likes of JAWS Inspect or JAWS to help you with this user-centered testing to prioritize user issues. Okay. if the issue falls in that flow, then it's automatically prioritized because it's impacting the user. And the impact, judging the impact of a particular accessibility issue will be down to its impact on that task. If you're trying to add an item to the shopping cart and there's something preventing you, then that issue is high priority. If it's merely an annoyance, a little less priority. Okay. ARC Toolkit then can be used by developers, QA teams, as I said, on the desktop at quite deep environments to test, retest, fix, retest again, etc. Then commit. And then you enter the test phase, and there again, you can do some very quick QA testing along that flow using the likes of JAWS Inspect. Check the content, check the structure, check the labels. I'll show you some of that testing and what I mean by that. And you can also do automated CI/CD testing, etc. in this process. And ultimately then you release and you're monitoring again, and you obviously want to see the improvements. You want to see your accessibility baseline either get better or certainly not get worse, okay, stay the same. And that's how you kind of combine all of those things into one using your test process. So I'm going to switch over now and start to look at some of this in action. Just turn this off. So I've mentioned a couple of times now JAWS Inspect. What is JAWS Inspect? It's a version of JAWS for testers. Okay. It essentially gives you a transcript of JAWS speech that you can then use to share issues that you find and properly analyze an interface and so on to see how effective it is for JAWS users. So it gives you a transcript. If you're trying to test with JAWS, you need to understand the end user product. There's a lot of shortcut keys. There's a lot to learn. And a lot of this is not necessary for a tester. Okay, so JAWS Inspect is stripped down. There's no audio. There's a lot of the end user features are turned off. So that makes it very easy to use. You can really learn it in minutes. But the important thing to remember is it is JAWS. It's not a simulation of JAWS speech. There is a JAWS engine in it. And actually, if I open up the settings, it's here in the Windows tray icon. You'll see that you can actually select a JAWS version. I've just got a couple here. You can select up to 3 previous JAWS versions. So you can toggle between different versions of JAWS to get the output from them. Again, not simulated, but a JAWS actually running here just without the audio, without the speech. Okay. And just to give you an idea of how this works and how you can use these transcripts effectively. So I'm taking a very simple example from this demo site with some thumbnails and a large image. And I'm going to hold down the control key and right click, and that gives me the JAWS Inspect menu. Okay, so it's really minimized. That's almost it really in terms of the interface, and a couple more things. Important to know that this is fully accessible itself, JAWS Inspect, even though I'm doing quite a clicky demo, if you like. All of the things that I'm doing here, like bringing this menu up, are keyboard accessible. And I'm going to run a full page report on this. Okay, so I just select full page report. And what's happening now is JAWS is reading through the page. Okay, it's going through all the elements of the page, and we're generating a transcript of JAWS speech, and there it is. So it opens up in a new window, and we have some metadata about what was done when, and we have this the transcript broken down in this full page report by a topic: links, controls, frames, headings. This makes it easier to properly look through, analyze the page. Okay, an important thing to note: JAWS Inspect is not a testing tool per se. It doesn't look for issues or flag issues. Okay, it doesn't do that. It is giving you a straight up transcript of exactly what JAWS says when it encounters each element on the page. However, I mentioned you don't need accessibility expertise to be able to use it. And the reason is that things are fairly obvious. Okay, so if you know, for instance, it's important for JAWS users to have a description of any non-text content, images in particular, or if that non-text content is purely decorative, that they have some mechanism to skip over it. Okay, if you know these simple rules, you can look at this report and immediately glean where there are problems and where it's effective. Okay, for instance, we've got a first link here. And this is what JAWS will announce: nav_icon_213m. Okay, meaningless. We can see from the screenshot that this is the home page, the home button, but none of that is conveyed to the user. JAWS Inspect also gives you this additional helper text or context that JAWS provides to the user to understand what they've encountered. In this case, visited link graphic. Okay, so you can check that all the roles and state information, etc., is correctly conveyed. But I can see immediately that there's a problem. And then the same with the next, we've got navbar icon 21941, link graphic. And then we've got the third image here, the large image. It's just complete gobbledygook. It's auto-generated code. And it's, JAWS is not going to be able to make any sense of that. And that's probably just auto-generated in a content management system, right? The thing is, automated technical testing of this might actually pass that. If it's a basic automated test, might say, well, we've got, this is correctly formed. There is an alternate text description for that graphic. There's a text string, number string. So therefore it passes. But we can see immediately that that's worse than useless. Okay, it'd almost be better off with no announcement than this announcement, which is very verbose. So if you just know a little about screen readers and the screen reader users, you can tell that this is a problem. But you can see from this example how this layer of user testing along the user journeys can throw up things that that you wouldn't necessarily find in technical testing unless you're doing an audit, but also that it makes it clear what really impacts the user most. Okay, so you can prioritize very quickly. Here we've got 3 different colors of shoes, but the alternate text is just shoe graphic, shoe graphic, shoe graphic, each the same. Again, might pass technical testing, automated testing, but it's going to be pretty obvious to the user that this doesn't work. And the nice thing, the real big advantage of this here is that I can then select these and export them as a JSON file for the likes of a bug tracking system, or as a CSV for an Excel spreadsheet. So I can get these directly to the developers along with the line of code where it occurs and send it to them, and they will be able to reproduce and diagnose the issue. Okay, this is something that's very difficult to do if you're using JAWS alone for the testing, because you've then got to go back and say, well, I heard something, I go back over it a couple of times, I think it's the third link on the page. Very difficult to actually figure out, what element was spoken and what piece of code is relevant, and try and communicate that to your development teams and testers. Okay, so this makes it an awful lot easier to raise bugs and to effectively identify issues. So that's just the simple functioning of JAWS Inspect and how you can use it. So I'm just going to go back and we'll have a little look at our actual, thinking of our test script and Victoria going through the site. Now we have another tool in JAWS Inspect, which is its most versatile and useful tool, I think, which is the speech viewer. And I'm just going to open that up now. And that's really for this purpose, which is to test process. Okay. And what the speech viewer is a live log of JAWS speech. So it's much closer to the actual experience for the user, but it's also, you can test dynamic elements, you can test menus, you can test the search function, all of those things, because it's going live. It's not sort of scraping the page in one particular state. So all I have to do to get it running, I'm going to click down on the header on the page just to start it off, and I start to get my log, okay? And there's a role for each item that JAWS announces. And we've got home, ARC demo site. I realize some of this might be quite small and difficult to see from your end. I'll read out what I can. And we've got visited, heading level 1, link AS. Okay, so that's the first item here. And I'm just going to continue tabbing. And we got awesome store link, and we've got current homepage. So as part of our test process, all users are going to have to navigate through the header, right, to get to anything else, at least the first time, until they can figure out to skip over things. So this is always going to be part of that test process, probably any of your test scripts. But a nice thing about this and using the speech viewer in this way is that you can also test keyboard accessibility as you go, which is a default requirement for screen reader compatibility. And we're testing here, and luckily there is a visual indication of focus that the developer has provided so that we can keep a track of where we are. We've got about AS link, got the more link, and suddenly we go back now. There's our nav icon 213 link graphic that we saw in the full page report. So that shouldn't even be a focusable item, since we already have a homepage link. So there's a problem right away. There's a problem with the keyboard order now because we've gone back to the start and we have an undecipherable graphic. Okay, so our process is already breaking down here for the user. Okay, and we can go in, we can run a search. Let's try running a search. And so we've got control type search edit here in the log, 4 results entries. Okay, so this is pretty good. Let's just search for shoe, and this updates then search SHOE, 1 result entries. Okay, we've got clear search button. So that button has got a proper label on it. We've got search button that's labeled correctly. And we've got our message. And I'm going to hit the enter key and find our search results. Now we're on the search results page. We've got site search edit, shoe. Okay, so far reasonably good. Clear search button, things are labeled correctly. All 4 tab, I'll just scroll this a little bit so we can see it. 1 of 3. Okay, so this is listed as a tab bar. That's good. And then we've got our training shoe. So let's go here. Actually, let's go to view all. So we're running through our process and we're making sure that all the items here are labeled correctly and that they function correctly. We've got women to checkbox not checked. Okay, we need to know, the end user needs to know for controls, form controls, they need to know the label, in this case, women. They need to know the role, which is checkbox. and they need to know whether it's the state it's in checked or not checked. That identity, role, and state are key things for JAWS users in particular to interact with controls. If they don't know one of those things, it's going to be difficult or impossible for them to use the control. Okay, so you just need to know when you're doing this testing, you just need to know those simple things about screen readers to be able to identify whether this is usable. And we're going to try and select that particular checkbox. And now the state, you'll note the state has changed to checked. Okay, and that's what you want. That's one of the key things you want to test when you're testing a process like this involving form fields and controls. Make sure that the states update correctly, labels update correctly when the state changes. Okay, we've got left right slider, selected item 180. Can we use this slider? Well, there's no way to move this slider. I can actually jump when I go this way. Yes, I can use the left arrow key to move that slider, and it does update, at least when I come back to it. 180 max, 185, selected item 184. Okay, so that's reasonably efficient for the user. Let's go and add this item to the cart. And we've got close modal button. Okay. So that didn't work. Oops. So something wrong there with the keyboard access, or maybe it's just the functioning of the button, the cart. Okay. So I'm going to pause this a second. So what you do when you run through the process, you do your whole test script that Victoria runs, the selector shoe, go through to the checkout process. Once you're finished, or even partway through, you can pause, okay? And that's your log of the task or the process. And you can then save that log again as a JSON file, which is machine readable format for sharing with the likes of Jira and so on, or Excel. And you can use that then, you can review that log and you can use that to track problems. So if you imagine this as a QA process that you run before a release each time, okay? Each time you're running a release on this particular site, you're going to run this test process where you run through those user journeys that you've designed. And it's important to say constantly edit and improve, but you run through that process, and where you find issues and inefficiencies, you identify them as bugs, and they're automatically prioritized because of the task they impact. Okay, and you can assess as you go, your testers can assess how big an impact on that task this issue might be, because they're trying to use it, right? They're trying to do this efficiently, trying to get around with the keyboard where they hit problems and they're difficult to solve. That's a big issue, right? That's a priority. And we have always Victoria in mind and particular annoyances that she might have, such as these unlabeled graphics and so on. And where we want to go again, I'll just bring up the actual shop here, I think, just to show you another example of the filters control. So I'm going to just clear this a second and play again, just to have a look at this control here. So again, what I talked about in terms of controls, we've got category button expanded. If I close that, the state changes to collapsed. So that's what we want. That's functioning correctly. Okay. And we're able to tab through the items there and get to the price. And then again, that's collapsed. And if I expand it, it should then be expanded. Okay. We have colors, and the colors are labeled. There's black. If I use the right arrow, I should be able to get through those. goes through the text. So there's a label in there that JAWS is reading through. I should get to blue, checkbox not checked. So interestingly, those have been created with what we call graceful degradation using checkbox as the original control, which is quite intuitive for the user, okay, because they get name, role, and state. So matching these controls up, these graphical controls, if you like, up with underlying simple HTML controls helps the user a lot in this case. So there we go. There's an example of using the script with JAWS Inspect. I also mentioned the ARC tool and how essentially you can test these same things using what we call in this case user flows, where you're testing the same flow, but ARC is acting as the user in this case, the ARC crawler, and it's carrying out the task. So it's selecting the sneakers, adding them to the shopping cart, and testing as it goes. Probably need to refresh this bit. Here we go. Shopping cart flow. So I can scan this flow on a regular basis. So this is just an example of how it works. So in this case, we're loading the front page of that demo site, and we're separating out the components. So we're going to test the header, we're going to test the footer as we go along, as we carry out this task, and we're going to test the search suggestions box. Okay, and ARC is going to scan those for accessibility against rules such as WCAG and check it. And the results go up on a monthly basis onto this automated dashboard. I'm just going to go back to where we have results. So here's our shopping cart flow. We're looking at this on the dashboard. And here are the issues that we've identified in our testing. So things like no image role, H1 in header, and so on. So ARC is acting as the user, going through the steps in our user journey, but doing it on a regular basis. And then what I'm looking for is changes, spikes. Okay, I'm less interested here in the specific problems as I am with the change itself. Okay, so this has gone down and it's gone in the right direction. So our testing is working, and we want it to continue in that way. Where we have spikes, we might need to intervene. Maybe we need to do more of that JAWS user testing, and we might need to do an audit. So this is kind of how you can use the same user journey as the basis for lots of different types of testing. And the advantage is it keeps your focus on what the user's trying to do and always on the user and their tasks. But the additional advantage, particularly with the likes of JAWS Inspect, is you understand the user's problems. So you're not just trying to do by the numbers. You're not just stuffing alt attributes with text. You're understanding what they're trying to do, and therefore you're understanding a little bit better how to solve for it. Okay, I haven't left an awful lot of time here, but I'll open it up for questions now, if you have any. So question would be, would ChatGPT or Copilot be good places to help curate multiples of personas? That's an interesting question. I haven't really, that's not something I've investigated so far. I do find personally a lot of this work that ChatGPT, etc., these AI chatbots can be very good for kind of brainstorming, for putting ideas together and things that you might not have thought of, right? Because they have the scope. They might not be very good in actually creating the personas. Obviously, you're thinking that the chatbot might analyze your traffic, for instance, and identify users. It can certainly pull that data together, and that might inform, for instance, your persona, what technology your persona is using, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, you're describing somebody, and as I said, creating a as much of a real person as you can, because that will ground the user journey that you're doing. And for that, you are going to need a human. The chatbot just isn't going to do it, or it's going to give you a lot that's extraneous. So I think certainly to help identify, the technical aspects of the persona, and to brainstorm a bit and make sure you have coverage of different types of users, absolutely the chatbot could be useful. JAWS and Inspect are different. JAWS Inspect is what we call minimal JAWS, so it's obviously built off JAWS without the speech. So they are different. JAWS Inspect is not an end user product, can't be used as a screen reader as such. You can, by the way, use JAWS and JAWS Inspect together at the same time. You can turn off the JAWS speech and just use for instance, the speech viewer in JAWS Inspect there. Why would you do that? If you're more sort of advanced JAWS user and so on, you can use all the various shortcut keys. So you could go through a page pressing the H key to browse the headings on the page, for instance, and you would see the results in the speech viewer and be able to share them. So you can use them together, but they are different, they are different target audiences for those products. What products did you demo? If you wanted to test and view a dashboard like that, is it JAWS Inspect? What is the dashboard? So the dashboard is our ARC product, Accessibility Resource Center. And that's our platform for accessibility management and testing. Okay. It's where we deliver our audit reports, and it's where we do our automated testing, etc. And we usually create an ARC account for any of our customers for our audits, etc. That's what the dashboard is. Could the practices and methods you described be used by blind and deaf testers? Absolutely. As I said, if you've got a common script and basis for all of your testing, including testing by users of assistive technology, which is always encouraged, then everybody's focused on the same thing, and that is brilliant, and it will help those testers to make their case for particular issues, because there's an agreed upon priority already around those tasks, right? Much stronger case to say, we want to be 100% compliant, which nobody ever gets to, versus we want to make sure that our shopping cart process is accessible to everybody. Okay? Much easier case to make in a business, and everybody's already agreed upon the criticality of that process, so that is a given. So it makes those arguments in those cases easier. Any more questions?
I don't think I see any, and we're just about at time, so I think we can wrap up. Actually, I do see one that just popped into chat right now. Is ARC Dashboard internally uses ARC Toolkit browser extensions, which scan page? Okay, maybe not. Maybe that was just a comment. Okay. Otherwise, I think we're good. Unless you have anything else, Charlie.
Nope, that's it. Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for your time. I hope this was useful. Yeah, if you have any questions on that basis, please do drop me a line.
All right. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you everyone for attending. Bye now.